Hi Silem stars, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to make a lovely Ankara dress with lace combination. The lace is at the yoke as well as on the sleeves, and there's a bit of the lace on the bottom half of the dress. If you've seen the thumbnail, you already have an idea of what we're making today. So without further ado, let's get right into the drafting, cutting and stitching of this dress from start to finish.
Oh, hey, I didn't see you there.
So I'm starting off by folding my fabric. I'm actually drafting on my lining first so that you guys can see clearly. So I mark the baseline, and then from the baseline downwards, I'm marking 9 inches, which is the hip line, and I'm also marking 19 inches, which is the knee line. And I also went ahead to mark the full length of this skirt, the skirt part of the dress. Now on the baseline, which is also the waistline, I'm marking the waist measurement divided by 4, and then I added 2 inches allowance to that. And then on the hip line, I'm marking the hip circumference divided by 4, and then I added 2 inches allowance to that as well. Now on the knee line, I subtracted 4 inches from the hip measurement, and then what I got, I divided it by 4. I marked that on the knee line and I added 2 inches to that. Now I measured the entire measurement I have on my knee and then marked that on the hemline. Now I'm connecting all those points together with a straight line all the way down to the hem. And then once I was done with that, I'm just going ahead to just cut along that line I marked. That's basically it for the front piece. Now to mark my back piece, or to draft my back piece, I'm just placing the front piece on top of a folded fabric again, and then I'm just replicating the waist, hip and knee lines. And then once I was done with that, I went ahead to cut the outline of my front piece. I cut that for my back piece. Now on the hip, I'm making sure that I have 1.5 inches allowance. On the knee, I make sure that I have 1 inch allowance rather, and then I connected those 2 points. So on the hip I had 1.5 inches allowance, but on the knee I had 1 inch allowance. Now from the hip, I just connected that all the way straight up to the hip, and then I created my slits all the way down from the knee to the hem. The allowance for my slits is actually 1.5 inches. Now after drafting on my lining, I just went ahead to draft the same thing on my fabric. So I use my lining to cut my fabric. Okay, now this is my front piece. I'm just placing the lace on top of the front part, the front piece of my skirt, and then I'm just cutting it, and then I'm making sure that the length of the lace is simply the highest point. So if you look at the lace design, you see that it is a V shape. Okay, now the highest part of that V is actually the length of my lace. I don't know if that makes sense, guys. So once I have that length I want, I'm just folding my lace to make sure that it's equal, and then I'm just cutting that V shape. Okay, like I said, the highest part of the V is the length of the lace. Okay, so if you want it to get all the way up to your hip, which is how high mine is, you just make sure you cut it all the way up to your hip. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and sew all the way around. Okay, so sew the lace down on the fabric, and after that I'm going to place my lining on top of my front piece. Make sure that they are equal at the bottom, sew that down. Okay, and then pull up the lining a bit and then sew the sides. Now the reason why I'm doing this is because my lining is 1.5 inches shorter than my main fabric, which is how you want it to be, so that you get a very nice hem. Can you see what the hem looks like now? So this is what it looks like once I was done. I did the same thing for my lining. I placed my lining on top of my fabric, as you can see, and as you can see, they are not equal at the bottom. So I'm just going to make them equal at the hem, join them together, and then after joining them together, I'll just pull it up so that they are equal at the waist, and then I'm going to sew the sides. I'll do this for the other back piece as well, and this is what they look like once I'm done. Can you see how neat it is? Now I'm going to place my 2 back pieces on top of each other with the right sides facing each other, and now I'm just going to mark 1/2 inch from the edge. Okay, half inch from the edge. Now when I get to my slits, I'm just going to take a straight line all the way down to the hem. Okay, all the way down to the hem. Just take a straight line from the slits. Now I'm going to go ahead and just sew that together to join my two back pieces together. And once I was done, this is what it looked like. Can you see? So once I open up the allowance, this is how nice and neat it looks. Now it's time for us to put in the darts. So from the seam line, I'm just going to mark 4.5 inches to the right and 4.5 inches to the left, both from the seam line. Now the length of my dart is 5 inches from the waist, and I'm just going to draw a straight line to connect that all the way to the waist. And then that's where we're going to go ahead and sew in our darts. So after sewing in the darts, this is what we have here. So our back piece is practically done. Now for the top part of my dress, this is the pattern I'm using. This is a shoulder dart bustier. I have a tutorial on this. You can check it out. So I went ahead to use the pattern to cut on my fabric. Now for my yoke, as you can see, I cut the yoke with the lace and the fabric, and that's because my client doesn't want her body to show around that yoke area, so I had to just cut the lace together with the fabric. You don't have to do this, you can cut only the lace. Now for my padding, I went ahead to pad my fabric with the hairstay and the breast pad. And can you see the breast pad I use? So it's called the wadding. So I use the wadding to pad my bustier. And then for my lining, I only used hairstay. Okay, I only use hairstay for my lining, but for the fabric I use hairstay and the wadding or breast pad. For my back pieces, this is what we have here. For all the back pieces, both fabric and lining, I used only hairstay to cut it. And for my yoke, I also cut the fabric and the lace, and this is what it looks like once I've gone ahead to join my pieces together. I've also turned guys, I'm stammering. I've also turned it with the lining, and that's what it looks like. So now my front and back pieces are done, both for the top and for the skirt. Now I'm taking the two front pieces, so the top and the skirt, and then I'm placing them right sides facing. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and join them together at the waist. For my back pieces, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just opening up the zipper allowance a bit for my skirt, and then for my blouse, I'm also opening the zipper allowance a bit at the waist. Now I'm placing them right sides facing, and then I'm going to go ahead and join them together, starting from the zipper allowance all the way to the other side. Okay, or from the zipper allowance all the way to the sides. So this is what my back piece looks like once I've joined it. I've also gone ahead to weave the allowance at the waist. So for my slits, I'm just going to go ahead and sew from the hem all the way up to where the slit stops, across and all the way down back to the hem. I also opened up my zipper allowance because I'm going to be inserting my zipper there. Now this is my front piece. Okay, this is what it looks like. Now I'm just going to fold my front piece lengthwise, and then I'm just going to divide her bust circumference, and then I'm going to mark that at the bust. Remember that we added allowance initially, so now we're going to mark the actual client's measurements. Okay, I'm marking her round under bust measurements at the under bust area. You can also use the waist at that area. I'm marking the hip circumference at the hip, and I'm also marking the knee measurements at the knee line. Now the same thing I have on my knee line is what I'm marking at the hem. I'm just connecting all those points together. Remember that to get the knee, I simply subtracted 4 inches from the hip circumference. Okay, that's how I got the knee measurements. So I'm just using my ruler now and my chalk to just define that line, and then I'm folding my piece with the wrong sides facing each other but still lengthwise, and then I'm just making sure to mark those lines I had marked on the other side. I'm just replicating those lines on the other side that I hadn't marked earlier. Then once I open it up, I'm going to use my ruler and my chalk to just make that line more defined. And now this is my back piece. This is what my back piece looks like. I've gone ahead to sew my sleeve down, and I've also gone ahead to put in my zipper. So my back piece is ready to go. Now, making sure that the right side is facing upwards, I'm just placing my front piece right sides facing with my back piece. So making sure that the right sides are facing each other. Now go ahead and join the shoulders, and then I'm going to join the sides as well, following that line or those lines that I marked. Now, to join the shoulders in a way that it's very neat, what you want to do is place both of them, the front and the back pieces. Now open it up. As you can see, we have the lace and the fabric. Open it up, and then make sure you align the joining, okay, the seam. Make sure you make sure that the seam is aligned, and then sew the lace on one side and sew the fabric on the other side. You can do the same thing if you're using your fabric and your lining for your yoke, okay. This works great when you're using a fabric and a lining. So this is what it looks like. Can you see how neat it is, both on the right side and on the wrong side? It's very, very neat. So once I have that done, I'm just going to mark the center point of my piece, and then I'm going to place the midpoint of her shoulder on that center point. Then I'll mark her shoulder on one side and the zero mark on the other side. In this case, her shoulder is 16 inches, so I just place 8 inches at the midpoint. I marked 0 on one shoulder and 16 on the other shoulder. And once I was done, I just added ½ inch seam allowance so that when I'm joining my sleeve, I don't eat into her shoulder measurement. Also, from the shoulder downwards, I'm just marking 8 inches, which is her armhole line. I mark that on both shoulders, and then I'm just cutting out the armhole, connecting that back to the shoulder with the allowance. And then after cutting the armhole, I went in again to cut about ½ inch from the front part of the armhole, just for the front piece. Now this is very important because of the bust area. You want that part to be fitted. You don't want there to be any fold when you attach your sleeve, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm just cutting ½ inch from just the front piece. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut my sleeve. I'm just folding my fabric twice so I can cut both sleeves at the same time. Now the length of my sleeve is 25 inches. I added 1 inch for seam allowance, so I'm just marking that. And then I also marked 5 inches from the top part of the sleeve, okay. Now on that 5 inch mark, I'm just dividing her round sleeve by 2, marking that on that 5 inch mark, and then I added 1 inch allowance to that. Now at the hem of my sleeve, I'm marking 8 inches, that's divided by 2, so 8 inches divided by 2, and then I added 1 inch to that. Now I'm connecting that all the way up to the round sleeve measurement, and then from the top of my sleeve, I'm just drawing a curve all the way down to where I have my round sleeve, which is the 5 inch mark. Then I'm just going to go ahead now and just cut out my sleeve. Now this is the beautiful part with folding your fabric twice. You get to cut both sleeves at the same time, so it saves you time. This is what the sleeves look like once I'm done. Now I'm just going to fold my sleeves again. I just opened it so you guys can see what it looks like when it was unfolded. Now I'm just going to go ahead and join or close up my sleeve with 1 inch seam allowance. Now I'm just placing these cutouts, these flower cutouts from the fabric. This is how I want it to be at the top of that V shape, just so that it's not just straight. So I just cut that out and I'll put it later. Now for the sleeve, I'm just going to attach my sleeve to the armhole already, as you've seen. So I'll just go ahead and join my sleeves to the armhole. Now it's time for us to create that lovely design we have on the sleeve. Now I want to decide your desired length and width. For me, I'm using 17 inches for my client's measurement, so 17 inches, that's what I'm using for the length. You want to decide how long you want yours to be. To determine this, you can go ahead and measure it, because this sleeve is not fitted on the arm, so you want to go ahead and measure it in such a way that you're able to decide how long you want it to be. Now for the width, I'm using 4.5 inches. That's for the widest part, but for the other part that is a bit narrow, I'm using 3.5 inches. So I'm just connecting that to, the 4.5 inch mark, and then I'm just cutting it out. So as you can see, this sleeve is not just straight, it's kind of smaller on the ends and wider towards the center. So can you see what it looks like now? So I'm going to have to cut and separate my two pieces. These are the two pieces I'm going to be using. You can go ahead and use hairstay for yours to make it more structured, or you can even use peplon stay or any strong paper stay that you can use to make it more structured. But for me, I didn't use any stay. I simply just sewed it at the bottom part. My client didn't want it to be very, very exaggerated, so I didn't use any stay. I just simply sewed it at the bottom part and weaved it out, and then I went ahead to just attach it to my sleeve. I just make sure to attach it very close to where you have the armhole. I did that for both sleeves, and this is the final look, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.